Hello, guys. Sorry, I just saw your message in the chat.
hour, so I'll call the meeting to order for Tuesday, April 4th. Attendance is the first thing on the agenda, and we have Councillor Jolly and Councillor Bermansky online and everyone else here in person, so 100% attendance. When we're going to adopt the agenda, I have two changes I want to make. We're going to flip 10.1 and 10.2, so we'll go to the traffic bylaw amendment first, and then to the e-scooter frameworks and business license stuff second. And then I'm also adding a 12.1. So we'll add 12.1, which is an in-camera. We're going to talk about just a verbal update from city manager on a cost sharing agreement with a neighboring municipality. And then we'll renumber, and 12.2 will be CAO dialogue. So got that? All right. So I need a motion to amend the agenda to approve the agenda as amended. Councillor Mackay.
That the April 4th, 2023 agenda be approved as amended.
Awesome. Call for the vote. Vote is closed and that motion passes unanimously. So before we start the meat of our meeting, we have the pleasure of a proclamation today, one that we've done, I think, for 4 or 5 years in a row now, because April is National Poetry Month and we have our poet laureate, Lauren Seal here. So I think what I'll do is I'll read the proclamation into the record, and then I'm going to invite Lauren to the microphone to read what she's prepared for us, which is always fun. So National Poetry Month. Whereas the League of Canadian Poets established the month of April as National Poetry Month, and whereas National Poetry Month celebrates poetry, writing, and the contribution of poets and all writers to the identity and quality of life of our communities. And whereas National Poetry Month encourages all cities to spotlight local poets in a variety of ways. And whereas these initiatives also celebrate libraries and the work of municipal leaders to promote literacy, reading, culture, and the arts. And whereas poetry enhances and enriches the lives of all St. Albertans. And whereas poetry is an essential part of the arts and humanities, affects every aspect of life, including education and community pride. And whereas poetry has inspired our local artists as we recognize St. Albert's Poet Laureate. So now, therefore, I, Kathy Heron, Mayor of the City of St. Albert, do hereby proclaim the month of April as National Poetry Month in the City of St. Albert. And we will be celebrating that all month long. We're going to have some nice readings at the beginning of our meetings. But most importantly, we have Lauren here with us today, who is our Poet Laureate. This program was started by the library about 5 or 6 years ago. She's our third Poet Laureate. She does a great job. She spoke at the Have a Seat at Our Table, which was a project with this food bank to talk about some of the at-risk and marginalized women in our community. And if you weren't there, you should have been, because it was fantastic, Lauren. You said in poetry what cannot be said in words. You said in poetry what we all felt in our hearts and on this issue. And I'm going to get a little choked up already because it was so good. So I love having you come to our council chambers or to wherever we are. So please come to the mic and share your gift with our council and anyone who's watching today. Thank you again for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I loved performing at Have a Seat at Our Table. Although the being charged by a junior high class, I was trying to exit in the middle. I'm like, okay, this is a new one for me. So yeah, April is National Poetry Month. And each year the League of Canadian Poets releases a new theme. So the theme this year is very aptly joy. So I wrote, well, it's kind of a poem about joy. There's a lot of sad stuff that I get through beforehand, but it gets joyous at the end. This jawbreaker life, the world can be callous, full of moments so hard they'd break my jaw to bite. Squirrels die under rush hour cars driven by people running too late to notice. Once loved dolls sit, eyes drooping, alone on thrift store shelves. Whales' songs are disappearing in oceans of noise pollution. Dogs never live as long as they deserve. Both my face and floods break out, and I don't have the time or the money to fix either. And some people are so generous with their cruelty, they toss it out like hard candy at a parade. Watch it fall in stinging blasts on bystanders' heads. I'll admit, I am quick to despair. I often imagine dragging my sad, wet bones, my eroded nerves, far away and tossing them down a well of anguish so deep no lassie dog would find me. I'll admit, I am quick to gloom, but equally quick to awe. I have been mesmerized by the fractal of a spider's web, smiled at the squawking of my friend's baby being read the Gruffalo for the 23rd time. My dog's squeaky yawns, the plinking of small unlearned hands on piano, the very existence of narwhals have all brought me joy. Most miraculous of all, whenever I have fallen down dark despair pits, there was always someone willing to offer a hand, rope, ladder, escalator, up to grassy land. There is always someone willing to help suck at this jawbreaker life until it is spongy enough to chew. Thank you.
That was awesome. I'm glad you warned us that it would get more joyful at the end. Because of it. Poor squirrel.
I also wanted to take this opportunity to announce a project that I'm launching next
Absolutely,
month.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's as I've deemed it, the Community Poem Project. So I viewed my tenure as the Poet Laureate as showing people that poetry is not just heavy and academic and esoteric and like a slog to get through, but that it can be just really fun and silly, but also most of all accessible. So in my mind, I'm like, well, what's more accessible than having everyone in St. Albert help me write a poem? So I've decided, I've just taken it upon myself. For the month of April until the 30th, if you go to the Poet Laureate page of the St. Albert Library website, there's going to be a form with a prompt. And that prompt is a question, which is, how do you create joy in your community? So I'm open to any answers. So it could be volunteering at the Children's Festival. It could be planting sunflowers and like leaving them for your neighbors to watch grow. Anything, it doesn't matter how silly, is acceptable. End of April, that form is closing and I am taking on the task of going through everyone's answers, theming them, ferociously editing and weaving them into a poem so that St. Albert will have a joyous poem written by the people of St. Albert. And I want to formally extend an invite for all of council to submit when the form opens later this afternoon. I would love to see how you create joy in the community.
So how are we advertising that, Lauren, so we can help spread the word?
Yeah, so there's going to be a media later today. And there
Okay.
will be an article in the Gazette.
Okay, perfect, because I'd love to help that in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will just, if you follow me on social media, I'm gonna just share it as much as I
Okay,
can.
perfect. Okay, awesome. That's exciting. And then when would you think you'll be done the poem?
Oh, so we are hoping to have it done and all of this other editing. We're going to share it in a variety of ways. So I'll perform it at community events. I believe I am launching it at this Canada Day celebrations.
Okay,
And hopefully we're having a video produced as well that can be shared.
okay, perfect. Okay. Yeah, no, that's a great, yeah. Because I was gonna say you could come here, but I think probably Canada Day would be a bigger draw. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, than just YouTube. All right, anyone have anything to say to Lauren? I'm gonna invite you down, Lauren. We'd actually got a paper copy of this to give to you, or do we normally keep this in the library? I'm not sure where we keep this. Moves around? Okay, well, let's get a picture. You don't want to be in the picture? Yeah, Jeff, come on out. Okay.
You said, I came right to me. You totally wrecked my. So that's why I hate.
So a couple of hard topics on our agenda today, so it's nice to start the meeting off with a little bit of joy. All right. Moving on now to business arising. I'm assuming there's no business arising from that, anyone? We're good? All right. Consent agenda. Would somebody like to read that in? Go ahead.
All right, that the recommendations in the following agenda reports be approved. 6.1, regular council meeting minutes of March 21st, 2023. 7.1, budget amendment for grants received from municipal facilities.
All right, call for the vote. Voting is closed. And that passes unanimously. So on consent, we just approved the minutes from April 21st, and we also approved a recommendation on grants received for municipal facilities. So the budget read as followed, or sorry, the motion read as followed, that the budget for capital project 423807 municipal facilities repairs and renewal be increased by $5,704,900 with, sorry, that's $5,704,900 with the increase funded through the federal Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Program grant. Such good news. That's awesome. It's too bad we couldn't do a big ribbon cutting, but it is what it is. All right. Bylaws was on consent, the offsite levy bylaw. Councillor Killick, you pulled it, I assume, to vote against it, or what other reasons?
Yes, to vote against it and also to ask for some additional clarification on a few key points.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So thank you. I'll get right into the questions, I guess. And this stems from our first reading, second reading, where it was recommended to go back and look at the documentation to do comparison year over year from 22 to 23. And I'll try and keep my questions focused to those because they were not addressed in our debate in first and second reading. So I definitely don't want to repeat things, but if it was page 200 in the original information package, and it's table 6, talks about developer share. And I just want to make sure there was a lot of discussion around what was shared and what wasn't shared and how reasons why. So I just, for my own edification, I guess I'd like to get clarification. Item 16 is the Hogan Road to Villeneuve Road, North City limits. And that project was estimated in 2022 at 11.9 million, and it's now up to 25 million in 2023. So that's a doubling or more than doubling of the budget for that. Just again, so I make sure I understand why Hogan Road is, number one, being extended a large distance to the new city boundary. I imagine that would have impact. And then Hogan Road is scheduled to have 2 traffic circles added to it, that one at Villeneuve Road and one at Night Flume, I think. And those are the 2 major changes that would have driven up the and then obviously contractor price increases. So just to make sure I understand why the number would have gone up so much from 22 to 23. Are those the three big key drivers?
Oh, thank you, Councillor. Perhaps I'll ask Tanya to speak to it initially, and if you need anything else, Dean is online.
Yeah.
Through the chair to Councillor Killick. So there's, I don't have the exact, all the paperwork with me, but we do have, there may be additional roundabouts going up through the north, as that's sort of our new preferred intersection. But yes, it is extended, and some of the costs have increased. So,
And I imagine
But-
number 4 would be changing it from a gravel road to
yeah, it needs to be urbanized.
urbanized, right?
Yes.
So, okay, so that kind of
Yeah, so
clarifies that and kind of sets the stage then, I think. So one of the other big items that we discussed was items 20 and 21. And those are St. Albert Trail 21, project 20 from Villeneuve Road to Fowler Way went from 41 million to 55 million. So that's a 30% increase. And this is on table 6, just the developer share. In our discussion, it was identified that did not include the cost to move the road over to realign it. That was a city decision, so it was a city cost. It also was that the developer would pay for those improvements because the intersections onto from Erin Ridge and Jensen Lakes would clearly be driven by growth. But there were other elements that were said were not included, that they were city covered costs. So I have 2 questions. What is the full cost of that project? Is it higher than 55 million? Because we are not paying for the city portion of things like that road realignment, and there was already an existing lane. So the comment was, well, we're not going to charge our developers for work on the existing lane, even though it's being repaved. So is the number that's in the offsite levy at 55 million for that project higher than 55 or what?
Through the chair. So it is higher than that. I have the actual breakdown of how the $55 million is there. So currently, if you were to look at projects 20 and 21, it's showing $90 million. At this point, we're showing about $97 million as our costs that we know are coming. So what I can do is provide you, I did write it down. So to date, like if we're talking project 20, which is 55.4 million. So we've had developers, so we've spent $26 million to date on that. So that 26 million, there's been 7.3 million, which was spent by developers. And so that's when they were kind of bringing on the commercial sites, things like that. Then we front-ended about $14.3 million. And this is phase 1 to 3. And we only added 11 million of that 14.3 to the offsite levies. We've also taken out debenture interest of almost $7.8 million, and that's to cover $19 million worth of construction. And that's going to cover some of the construction from this year as well. We estimate that we still have some work to complete. So that's another 29.4 million. And of that, phase 1, we think there's 5.25 million left to be completed. And we've only added 3.37 million into the bylaw. Phase 2 is 6.55, and we've only added 3.5 million. And phase 3, we have an estimate of 24.6 million, and we only added 22.53 of that. And one of the other things that drove the price increase as well was last year when I did the update, I didn't change the amount that was allocated to phase 3 because we hadn't done design work. So I didn't have an updated project cost. If you want, project 21 is a little bit different, because we're.
So could I just, clarification here then? From a process perspective of what the numbers that we're looking at here. I'm here to learn and listen and learn. So wouldn't it have been better to have shown the larger full amount and then shown the different share? Because like on other charts, like table 2, it shows city share versus developer share. So wouldn't we have been better to show the full, I don't know, 65 million and then say, oh, but 55 is for developer and 10 is for city?
I would say in a perfect world, yes. What happened though was the developers came in first and were doing the work before St. Albert Trail was fully designed, and they wanted to be reimbursed at 100%. And so because we were using the same projects, if I was to change it to a 65 or 35% or 70-30 or 10-90, what would happen is the portion, we would be underfunded because we would then be contributing to costs that should be fully borne by the development community. So that's why it wasn't changed. And so this was an opportunity to, and it was very clear, like we've been very open with the development community explaining this, and that's why it is. Because we didn't want to short fund the project.
Yeah, okay. Again, I'm just trying to, when I see the numbers in front of me, they don't, I guess they don't paint the full picture of it, but your answer provides that. So, okay, let's talk about project 21 then. St. Albert Trail, Fowler Way to North City limits. So that project went from 11 million up to 35 million. So that's a 200% increase. Part of that, I imagine, is extending it to the extended new city boundary, but that's only about half a kilometer or something. So what was the driver in that large 200% increase?
Through the chair to Councillor Killick. So again, this was an instance where I didn't have new information in 2022. So I chose to wait until I had new one because I try to be consistent. And so when I say, I heard rumblings, but I didn't have anything defined. So in for the 2023 update, I received more information, new numbers. And so, because we are starting to progress a little bit more on our design at the time. So the numbers were low last year.
Okay, because it was an
old
an
estimate.
interesting term that it was a probability of something or something. I can't remember what it was, but it was
So probable opinion of probable cost.
opinion of probable cause. I'll add that to my jurisprudence dictionary. Okay, so $35 million, even though it's a big increase, is a more realistic number then for that extra half a kilometer of road.
Through the chair. So I think that's important to note, like we've seen that in a lot of our projects, right? Like, so Villeneuve Road is one where it's changed. We've had even developers who thought they were going to do some road work and estimated it was going to cost $3 million, but now the same piece of work is now costing 5.2 million. So it's not just the city that's seen these cost increases. So
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Your mention of Villeneuve Road is kind of a great segue into my next question. It's on project 41, and in 2022, we've known a long time about Villeneuve Road and what we're doing from Ray Gibbon Drive back over to St. Albert Trail. So that project was the one of much debate around percentages, and I just wanted to make sure in 2022, the chart shows 5.6 million for city share, that's 70%. And then the project was 30% for city share, and that was 2.4 million. and for a total project cost of 8 million. And now in 2023, what we're being asked to approve is that project went from 8 million to 19 million. The 35 and the city share dropped to 35%. So it still stays, last year it was 5.6 million, this year it's 6.5 million. So our share of that job stays pretty much close. But the developer share goes to 12 million. And that's a 65% share of the total 19 million, which is again, almost it's more than 100% increase in cost. So am I following things right there that?
Through the chair. So you're following the percentages correctly. But the overall project cost did increase, and I'll probably get Dean to provide some information after I've spoken. Because he can explain better how the original cost the benefiting determination was done. That was based on a potential cost share with some local developers. Then when we actually got into scope and started doing the work like detailed design and seeing what elements would be actually attributable to growth and urbanizing the road, that split was changed. And so we moved it to a scope percentage. So the reason the city's percentage like cost would be relatively the same was you're looking at an older cost where we were paying a larger percentage. So you should look at the percentage of the new cost. But I will get Dean to speak to it as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Tanya. I just want to confirm everyone can hear me because previously I heard that maybe the volume wasn't that great. So
yep,
hopefully
You're good.
Okay, fantastic. So just to jump into Tanya's point, the initial cost share was between the city and two developers in the area that Villeneuve directly is adjacent to and benefits. And this was before Villeneuve was part of the offsite levy approved project list. And the cost share split was based on traffic modeling, which the city represented background traffic, so regional, interjurisdictional, not related to growth trip generation. And the developers were the opposite. They represented the actual growth in trips generated from the new development. And that's where that 70-30 split came from the traffic volumes. Recognizing that modeling, again, is not a very defined and specific. It's taking a glimpse and putting in what's anticipated for growth and background and whatnot. That's how the split was generated. When the project advanced and was approved as part of the offsite levy programs as a project, the communication with the developers was a preference to focus on scope of work, and thus anything attributing to new intersection improvements, access improvements, new sidewalk trail, landscaping, utility infrastructure, that's associated with the growth for the growing demands of the corridor and whatnot. And then components of addressing, like, say, the existing asphalt, similar to what was discussed with St. Albert Trail, those are not components of an offsite levy scope of work. And so the percentage of the 65-35 represents now a variance in the actual costs of construction. The percentage is based on the estimates and the scope associated with those, with the project.
So it is the 19 million the full cost of that project?
So I believe, just for clarity, I think the value is 17 million in for the construction estimate. And that's to do, essentially, that's representing phase 1 and 2, which takes us from tying into the commercial accesses just to the immediate west of St. Albert Trail to approximately to Ray Gibbon Drive is about where we're going. So there's a section west of Hogan Road that may be, not really improved, but subject to servicing, because Villeneuve won't connect to Ray Gibbon in the long term. But that's the boundary, and that's for that entire section. Nothing, though, just for clarity, it's not inclusive of any cost associated to the west of Ray Gibbon.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And I appreciate that. It does say Ray Gibbon, even though that road that Villeneuve does go to the new city boundary and new configuration. So, okay. Thank you for that clarification. Go ahead, Danny. Yeah.
Sorry, I just had a little point to add. The project cost also includes some work that's not in the scope of what we're currently proposing to construct, because there's a section that goes up through where will connect to Fowler. That's in the estimated total project cost, which is why Dean's cost is a little bit different than what's in the the model. So that's that difference, if you were wondering.
Okay, perfect. And this is a question maybe for Dean, but Villeneuve Road, I read the Complete Streets document, and when we first debated this, I said, I wish I had a map. Well, lo and behold, there's an awesome map in the page 2 of the Complete Streets. So this is one of the ones that is a connector road. I want to be clear, Hogan or Villeneuve is a connector road. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, good. Because there was a lot of confusion around collector and connector. And I wanted to make sure I got that straight. So would this information have been shared directly with the developers, that they would have known what was coming? Because we had this steering committee, which is more operational, and then there are developers that are directly affected by these projects. And those are two separate activities. Am I reading it right that the developers would have been engaged and aware of these changes, both to St. Albert Trail and Villeneuve?
So I believe that absolutely in terms of Villeneuve Road, there was a great length of discussion around what roadways to add into the offsite levy model for consideration. And it was very specific around connectors. And there's a list of connectors for servicing new growth and whatnot that Villeneuve was a part of. And so there was direct recognition, I would say, from every stakeholder that yes, this was a component of consideration if you're adding these on for this scope and these projects and what they would mean, their alignment to Complete Streets. Villeneuve is a little bit different because it's a secondary highway cross section compared to a gravel cross section. A lot of our future connectors in the annex area are existing gravel structures. But short answer would be yes, I would have believed that there was very clear understanding of what was being added for projects and costs or projects themselves.
So Dean, I'm really trying to understand. You believe the discussion was taking place, but I'm trying to get a kind of simple answer to a simple question.
Sorry. Yeah. They voted on connectors to be added as projects.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear, that people were absolutely engaged with our developers, and our developers through that committee had a vote on these changes.
That was confirmed.
That's correct.
Yeah, I was just going to give Tanya a chance, but I'm fine. I heard a yes, so that's good. I don't need to belabor the point. So in any other context of kind of sharing and engagement of the information, when I saw this for the first time, a lot of information to absorb, and I was still struggling to say how, as my role on council, to review all of that information in a information package like a week before we get to see it and approve the changes that are very significant. In the past, has there been like a workshop to go through it in more detail than we had a general overview workshop, but we didn't get into the real specifics of some of these really big changes. So Just,
So we always have our information session that is open to the public, and we do invite council to that. And that's
Yep.
where we do tell the development community and other interested stakeholders how all the things have changed. We don't go through every project. We talk about the highlights. So Villeneuve Road and the change in cost allocation was highlighted to them. It's always, we also provide like a update sheet that kind of provides all that information to highlight it. So if they're looking for more information, they know exactly where to go and to look for it. As for, we have had we did do a sort of offsite levies 101 with council.
yes,
I don't know if we typically go through the projects specifically with you, only I guess maybe because it's more of a function, like offsite levies are collected to support growth. The city typically wouldn't be a benefiting party. Like, we shouldn't have too many obligations where we're funding towards certain projects, because really the intent is to provide the infrastructure to support growth. Typically, where we would share in those costs is if we had existing infrastructure and we were either rebuilding it or expanding it. So that's where we might have a share because we have existing benefit from it. Sometimes it's things like council policy. So council policy on our water lines. So our water transmission lines, it's a 25-75 city developer split. That was a council direction. Same with Ray Gibbon Drive, those types of things. So sometimes the council sets a specific policy that sort of provides us the direction to move forward. But typically, I guess we don't really get too much into the weeds.
okay, thank you. I don't have any more questions. I appreciate the clarity of the answers.
I think Councillor Killick, if you want, I'm sure to volunteer your time, Tanya, if you want to sit down and get it. I can tell you after 13 years sitting here, offsite levies is very confusing. And so I'm sure there would be an offer to walk you through some of it, because we don't go through the project specifically because we put an enormous amount of trust in Tanya and the entire engineering team. And what I've heard from even the development community is how much they respect the work that's being done here. So next year, maybe that would be an opportunity for you, but I see no more questions. So I'll go to you, Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, Counselor, if you could turn on your microphone.
To have them, thanks, just saying.
Why don't you read the motion in first and that can be part of your debate?
Yeah, okay, fair enough, good point. But the point will be lost by then. That bylaw 6/2023 being amendment 12 to offsite levy bylaw 30/2013 be read a third time.
Now I want to hear what you're going to say.
Well,
What
timing
did
is
Steve
everything.
Jobs say?
Timing is usually everything, and I blew that. So so basically, I was just saying, it just reminds me of the quote you get from Steve Jobs when he's talking about hiring smart people. And you don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. You hope that by hiring smart people, they tell you what to do. And I see that in Tanya, and I see that in staff. So and I mean, realistically wise, I don't even know what we saw this last year with such significant increases because of costs way beyond even costs that our developer friends are seeing and being impacted by. I mean, we're obviously going to be impacted by those same costs. And as much as we don't want to pass those costs on it, I mean, growth has to pay for growth. That's the fundamental kind of philosophy behind why we have offsite levies. And we even saw earlier, and I don't want to redress some of the comments I made in the opening of first reading, but we did see decreases in other areas like stormwater. We saw stormwater rates decrease. We saw minimal impacts in utilities, but unfortunately, roadways is the costs are the costs. So, yes, I don't think they're going to go down by 40 some odd % next year, but they may level off a little bit so that by the time that we actually start to look at some of the actual construction, some of the actual costs will be lower. So those are my comments.
All right. Anyone else on debate? Councillor Jolly, Councillor Bermatsky? Councillor Hughes, you're good? Yeah, I guess we said it all at first and second reading. Difficult decision. But I see no alternative, honestly, other than the city or the residents bearing the cost. So I'll put it over to you to close, Councillor McKay.
I just hope that residents voted me in because I was kind of smart. So nonetheless, what Steve Jobs said. So, and I truly wanted to listen and learn, and you get smarter every day when you listen to smart people. So I appreciate the comments from administration, and I appreciate that you were obviously well prepared for my questions, and I think that may have been in response to some of the questions that and points that were raised in the letters from UDI. So I hope that they're also watching the video or will watch it later, and that may help to address some of their concerns that they had raised previously. So I think we've addressed two things here all at the same time.
All right. Sorry, I didn't see you push your speaker button. Do you have anything to close, Councillor McKay?
Yeah, no, it's fine. No, and I just want to take the opportunity. I wouldn't, by that quote, didn't make any inflection on who sits at this bench whatsoever. So
I didn't read
I
it
just
that
wanted
way.
to make sure everything knew that.
Call for the vote. Voting's closed, and that passes unanimously. Section 9 is emergent items, which is actually, we do have one. It's the rec or the cost sharing agreement, but we are going to deal with that in camera. So we'll go right now to council motions, which the first one is 10.2. Councillor Killick, the first step in this is to read your waive of notice in before we get to anything else. It says that the 21-day notice requirement.
Sorry, Mayor, could we get Councillor Killick to turn on his microphone? We didn't hear any of that.
We haven't read anything yet.
The traffic.
No,
so
just
this-
read the waive of notice, the very bottom
Yeah.
sentence. Yeah.
that the 21-day notice requirement in section 119-9 of the procedure bylaw be waived.
Okay, this is a motion, so I will allow anyone who has a question. Go ahead.
Thank you. So I'm trying to figure out why this needs to be brought forward now. Because I'm like, my stuff is relevant to the operations of the business licensing, and so that's time relevant. But when I look at this, I'm not sure why it needs to be done now.
So through discussion with our alleged services, the two items are related.
Okay.
If the helmet bylaw changes that I've tabled, and if they are voted on and are successful, it would make a change to the business license
Okay.
rules, because currently the rules say anybody has to wear a helmet. And this particular motion that we're asking to waive the 21-day notice on is to change the helmet wording in the business license to say only under 18.
Okay. The other question I had was to admin. I'm looking at you, Marta. Although now she's talking to someone else, I don't want to bug her. I'm just going to wait a second, okay. So hi, Marta. So the question I have to you is, so even if, let's just say that everything passes today, the traffic bylaw still actually hasn't been amended. It's a direction to bring back the bylaw for amendment, which I'm assuming the earliest would be April. It's the intention, because if we said this and everything's came back on April 18th for a complete thing, or
Well,
do we have to
actually,
do advertising, or how does
Agenda
that work?
planning, because Councillor Killick has a separate motion on helmets and age limits for bicycles, we've decided we're only bringing the traffic bylaw once, so that'll be in May. So if this passes, Councillor Killick was willing to wait till May to have both his motions brought together at once.
Okay, so my question is, if it passes, and maybe I'm ahead of myself on this, but just so I understand, if it passes, is it still going to be like the business bylaw and the e-scooter business licensing is still not going to be compatible until everything has been passed?
So they're two separate bylaws. And so on the table right now, in terms of Councillor Killick's notice of motion, we're just talking about traffic bylaw, which regulates users of the e-scooters.
Yeah.
The businesses and the e-scooter framework will operate, notwithstanding the changes, like when the changes to the traffic bylaw are made. And the business license conditions will be amended in accordance with when the traffic bylaw is amended, notwithstanding when that is.
Okay, so with that, is there still the urgency to do this today? Because we're not going to have any of the amendments done until we vote on both. Sorry, my computer's died. We vote on both and it's done in May. Is there actually an impetus to have this decision made today?
Councillor, I think obviously defer to Councillor Killick on that driver, but from an administrative perspective, no, there's no urgency to have this done today.
Because we could still vote on all of this on the 18th and it would just be what it is.
That's correct. And the business license, being an administrative document, can be amended at any time and will obviously be governed by bylaws and will be current with those bylaws as they change and evolve.
Okay, and the backgrounder wouldn't change either way, I'm assuming, right? It would be the same.
Yep, correct.
All right, I don't know how I want to vote on this now. Okay, that's it, thanks.
All right, I see no more questions, and since I suspect there might be some varying opinions, if you want, you can have opening comments before we go to a vote.
Yeah, I think this one is pretty straightforward. And it really has to do with the wording for using helmets and changing it from everybody has to wear a helmet to aligning it more with the provincial regulations that say people under the age of 18 have to wear a helmet.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is the biggest piece. The reference points that I would use is that we have many other high risk, if you will, activities within the city that we don't require and make it mandatory to wear a helmet. Like we don't wear a helmet on our outdoor rinks. We don't make it mandatory to have that. We don't make it mandatory to have skateboarders wear it at our skateboard park. We don't make it mandatory when we have people using toboggans.
Councillor Kelly, let's make sure we're just talking about the urgency of today, not the actual motion.
So, okay,
Yeah.
fair,
So
fair
we're
enough.
just
So,
talking about waiving, why we need to do it today instead of next week or whatever.
well,
Yeah.
I had asked that question of Ledge, and it was said because we're bringing the business license for discussion today, and one of the items in the business license is the licensees must notify the use of helmets. So I wanted that helmets were mandatory for all users. And I wanted to get this motion in urgently to say we change it to just people under the age of 18 to coincide with the business license.
Councillor Broadhead?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So to speak to the motion around the 21-day notice, one of the reasons why the 21 days was landed on was to make sure that the people in our municipality are fully aware of what's being considered by council. What is being proposed for debate is around changing our helmet bylaw. And the helmet bylaw has been in place in St. Albert for as long as I've been around on council, and during that time has been defended significantly based on safety and a number of other reasons. And if we were to debate this today, I'm not sure that the rest of the citizens in our municipality would understand that we're even talking about that. And I think they need to understand that. And so I'm not going to support the 21-day waiver simply because we need to get it out there that this council is in fact debating whether or not we're going to change the helmet bylaw in our community. And that goes for bicycles as well, as I understand it. So in any way, to me, there needs to be transparency in terms around how and what we're debating. And in this particular case, the waiver, I don't think is in our best interest.
And just to be clear, Councillor Broadhead, we're just talking about helmets when you're on a scooter. His other motion is helmets on a bike. But you're right, if one passes, it might influence the other, or something like that. Yeah. Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, that was just exactly the point I was gonna identify, but I take Councillor Broadhead's opinion, and I'm not gonna support waiving 21 days today, but and really only because something you raised in your broad opening comments around 21 days, you actually raised some interesting issues that I think I want to have the opportunity to gather a little bit more information on myself. So I just want, combined with just maybe engaging with the public, but also maybe just doing a little bit, plus also getting a little bit more information from administration. I'm not willing to support 21 days right now.
All right, Councillor Jolly.
Thank you. I'm also going to oppose the waiver of notice. I think the notice is in place to make sure that we can engage stakeholders in our community. And the waiver should only be used if there's something urgent happening, and, you know, requiring me to wear a helmet for the next however many weeks. There's no risk in requiring me to wear a helmet. So that's why I'm opposing this today. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll let you close, Councillor Killick.
Yeah, I think hearing the comments around when this will be coming back for one big review in a couple of weeks is fine. I understand originally my intent was to have it line up before the business license, but if everything can wait and do it all in one sitting and debate, then I'm certainly fine to listen to my other counselors and accept their recommendation.
Okay. Sounds like you're going to withdraw. I've already accepted it. Why don't we just vote on the waiving? And if it fails, it fails. That's probably the easiest way to deal with this. So I'll call for the vote. Voting's closed and it fails unanimously. Councillor Killick, you make me laugh. Okay, so we will have a conversation. Can't remember. I think agenda planning should plan both these debates on the same day. And then we will bring, if one other both pass, we'll bring the traffic bylaw back in May. Actually, even if they both fail, we have to bring the traffic bylaw back in May for e-scooter references. Okay.
Does Councillor Killick have to read in his first reading later in the agenda though?
Nope.
Doesn't he, just to get it?
Oh, for the
Yeah.
bicycle
Yeah.
one? Yes, I've got it under notices of motion.
No, for this one as well?
No, you've already read it.
No, he didn't. Did he?
He's read it into the record, like that, the notice of motion, still there, just the waiving. bit.
I can't recall him reading the original,
Yeah,
but if you
yeah.
said you did, I couldn't recall. Thank you.
All good. All right, 10.1. Amendments for e-scooters. Councillor Hughes, I will get you to read it in.
Thank you. Before I read it in, can we actually ask a couple questions, or do you want me to read it in and then pull some? Because I want a little bit of clarification, not necessarily from Marta, but also from whoever else. So
If you're proposing changing
yeah,
the wording, then yeah. ask the
potentially
question.
changing or removing
Okay.
some. So first of all, thank you, Marta, for the quick turnaround. This was I was pondering this forever, and when I realized what the background came in yesterday, and so I guess forever was just a short period of time, but it felt like forever. Okay, so one of the things that I have in here was about the speed limits, and you had a response that we already have the limit the speed to 15 kilometers an hour. When I look at the actual document that was brought forward on the April 4th or agenda package, it has the 15 kilometers per hour taken out. So if it's section 10D under conditions for e-scooter operations, it says governor that limits the speed of e-scooters, but it doesn't say 15 kilometers per hour. So that was the intention, was to actually have a governor that limits it in my motion. And I'm just not sure if it's written somewhere else and that's why that was taken out, or if you can just help me understand.
Yep, through the chair to Councillor Hughes. So the section that you're referring to in the business license conditions talk about the features that an e-scooter must have.
Yeah.
But then above, there's a condition number 5 that says that the companies have to ensure that their e-scooters can't go faster than 15 kilometers per hour on
It's in
flat
there.
ground.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So thank you for just making that, because I missed it, and so forgive me. So you were right on that one, so that's great. So then the condition just is that it's already governed in there, so that's perfect. The other question I had was, and I'm not sure who would have this answer, is one of my motions is that they provide the reporting. Let me just get to it here, sorry. There's so many here, and I'm sorry. To submit a report, by December 1st, or that when the business license expires. And what I wasn't sure of is, does the business license considered expired on December 31st of that year, and then you reapply? Or is it business license expires when they are no longer in business with the city, full stop? Because if it says when it expires, then it would be expected on December 31st, and I don't need to have a December 1st statement in there. But if it's when it actually ceases doing all business with the city altogether, then that would be an end of business life report.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll ask Mike Erickson,
Sure.
who's online, to take the lead on that.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Through the chair to Councillor Hughes. The license does expire. The business license is an annual license, so it does expire at the end of each year. So the intention was at the end of the year that there would be a requirement that these licensed e-scooter businesses provide us with a bit of a summary report, and we did add some additional data points, I'll call them, under section 29C of the conditions to the business license.
Okay, so because I can take off then the before December 1st, because it's going to be done by the 31st de facto. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to add in there, so it would say upon expiry of the business license. I think we should say each year, just so it's clarity. And also I wanted to have an option of just if requested by the city. So if we did have a concern, we'd have that option to ask for it within 5 business days. Not that I'm expecting us to exercise it, but that's that you, if you needed that information, you had accessibility to it. Is there any issue with that on your part?
I think that's sorry, through the chair to Councillor Hughes, that's a fairly easy change to make.
The other question I had was, and I thank Marta, I thank you for putting all together. Some of these were in Councillor Killick's motions. I'm prepared to put them forward and vote for them as they may. I'm not necessarily going to support every one of them, but just so we know, one of the concerns was about the paved trails to include hard surfaces like cement. And so I'm going to look, I guess, I'm not sure, it might be to you, Mike. Was it implied that hard surfaces like cement were considered paved trails, or does it have to be specified?
Through the chair to Councillor Hughes, I think the intention there would maybe just a cleanup of our language to ensure consistency.
So do we
Just
want to have that included hard surfaces like cement? Is it necessary, or is it just or do we just leave it as is and have it basically understood that that is also included?
So if I might, Councillor, recommendation, I think would be to leave it as hard surfaces. We can specify certain elements, but we might be missing other elements, and I think hard surfaces is sufficient. We've also dictated where they can and cannot be used in terms of the city infrastructure, which effectively says the same thing.
So my question is, so of the amendments that Marta brought forward for us, just in summary, is F and G then necessary, or is it also understood?
I think you just said it was understood.
It's understood, so basically we can take those.
I want to cautious counsel right now. This is a business license. It's a condition that we have given the authority to Mike Erickson and his team to do, whether we're talking about asphalt, concrete, marble, brick. This is in the weeds stuff. And I want to really cautious us on how far we go on some of these questions. This has been delegated to Mike to do. And the more motions we do to fiddle with it, the less flexibility he has tomorrow when we design a rubber surface and it's hard, like it gets a little beyond the governance role. So I want to really be cautious on some of these questions.
That's why I'm asking them, so I don't bring them forward for debate unnecessarily, because this was brought forward last minute and we're combining the two sets of motions together. These are not specifically mine.
These are Mike's motions, so
They are
ask
Mike's.
questions on yours. Yeah.
But, well, she brought forward all of them together, so I'm
But they're
just,
still his motions.
so I'm not bringing forward his and he'll bring forward
Nope,
his? Is that how it
they're
will
his.
work?
No, they're his.
Okay, so we will just separate them.
Yeah.
So basically I have A, B, and C on those. And then D through H would be Counselor Killick. And then the bylaw amendment is mine. And I believe that is it, right? Just for 1 second. There's the framework, and then there was the limitation one about the total limitation of the scooters. I'm just trying to find this in the email. Please forgive me. Marta, I'm asking you to tell me if I've got it here, just so I'm ready to go for all the motions, because I have to read them all in.
So Counselor Hughes, if I can just assist, I think what you're referring to is one of your, part of the substance of your notice of motion today was about potentially limiting the number of e-scooters in the city. And so I suggested near the bottom of the email that I sent right before lunch that is really a precision.
Separate, yeah.
It's a separate, it's changing the framework entirely for the city. So I set out the process there for how you would go about that if you wanted to bring that forward today.
Okay, because my actual motion did mention that out of the gate. It said to limit the number and to provide those parameters, and the parameters weren't specified. So that's why I did put the specifications in, because I have it right in here that by appropriate bylaws, yada, 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 to limit the overall number of e-scooters approved each year. So I did give it in my original notice of motion. I'm actually just specifying the number so that way we know what we're debating. So with that, is there a specific wording? Not necessarily the second, I can do it after we debate, like I'll give you a couple of seconds here, but the intention of the limitation was put in my notice of motion 3 weeks ago.
Correct. And so the reason that I responded in the email the way I did is because that would be a change of the direction that council has given to administration on March 21st. In our opinion, on March 21st, when we were given direction to proceed with the low regulation free market framework, the ability to specify, to limit the number of e-scooters per company and the number of companies is a type of regulation which is inconsistent with that framework. So it would require council to rescind the motion that was just passed and direct administration to proceed with option number 2, which is a low regulation framework.
Which is what we discussed at committee in March, the 2 frameworks. And one of the thing about regulatory was limiting the number of companies, limiting the number of scooters. That was a highly regulatory framework.
Correct. So in terms of the number of e-scooters and the number of companies, in order to bring forward the notice of motion to rescind the previous motion, we would then bring back recommendations from an administrative perspective about what is the appropriate number of companies to limit, what are the appropriate number of e-scooters total in the city, what is the number total per company limit appropriate, that would be more of the details that would be provided if that notice of motion to rescind the motion previously passed today.
Okay, here's the situation though. I put this motion forward the day of April 14th or whatever it was. And I was told I could not vote on this, that I had to give notice of motion, which is what I'm doing today for April 4th. And then it was passed the week after I gave notice of motion. And so I feel like I'm in this conundrum because I was prepared to vote on it on the 14th. And then it was passed before we'd have a debate on it. My intention is not to go to the framework of 2 of the second option, but simply to add this one amendment to what was presented. And now I'm being told that we have to do a notice of motion again on something that I gave notice of motion, fair warning, before it was passed.
I don't think she's saying you have to give notice motion again.
That's what I read in
think
the email.
Everyone heard your motion about limiting the number of scooters. They knew that when they voted on the framework, which was free market. So that's what the council voted for. None of these restrictions, even though they knew you were intending to do this, they chose to go with the free market model.
So I never got to have my motion debated, is what you're telling me, because the intention was to have the motion debated, good or bad. And then we're saying I had to give notice, and then during that time, it was voted against it, knowing my notice was pending. And so therefore my motion is no longer valid to be
No,
voted.
the other pieces of your motion are valid.
But this one element,
Correct. And so if you want, and if you want to maybe even start there, you can put forward the motion that was suggested by Marta earlier today to rescind and see where it goes.
So just to clarify, there is a requirement for a notice of motion if you're
that's
rescinding a
right.
previous motion. However, that can be waived
That's
by a
right.
simple majority today. So we could debate it today because it is part of the substance of the notice of motion administrative backgrounder that we prepared for today.
but I don't want option two is my thing. Like you're telling me it's option one or option two. I don't want to rescind it and do option two. I wanted what we have with this one element. So
I guess in the opinion of our administration, that element makes it option two.
but there's other
That-
things
would that be
attached to
correct?
option two that I don't want.
Am I interpreting that correct? This requires our staff to do work and be regulatory of who and where and what kind of
Yes.
scooters are on our
And
street.
perhaps not to the same extent that option two presented, but to an extent more than a free market model would use. So it's not possible to do that without extra, staff time and resources spent on it.
Right.
So could I put forward a motion to rescind option one and do an amendment of option one plus a limitation of 300 scooters per annual year? Because I don't want option two. I'm not going to be pushed into something I don't even want to have myself.
Madam Mayor, point of order, maybe a 5-minute break here.
Sure.
Yeah.
For Councillor Hughes to confer with staff.
I just need to figure out what's going on here, but I don't want to put forward a motion I don't intend to. And I also want to be able to put forward the motion. So can we talk for 5? Okay, great. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes, Councillor Jolly, we'll come back at 2:15. Sorry, Bermansky and Jolly, 2:15. All good? Okay, we're back. I'm gonna turn to, I was gonna turn to Marta, but she's walking away. Go grab whatever you need. Marta and Mr. Fletcher, can you let me know what the solution you came up with is?
So during the recess, we convened with Councillor Hughes to determine her intention, and I think we drafted up a motion that covers what Councillor Hughes would like to cover in her notice of motion. So essentially, the idea is to not do away with the free market entirely, but to add a caveat to it, which is that there would be a limit on the total number of e-scooters permitted in the city.
And can we tell me how we landed on the number 300?
I can tell you how I landed on it. That's what we had last year during the pilot.
Good, okay, okay, so we still don't have a motion on the floor.
Do you want me to put this one forward first?
Not yet. Councillor Killick's got a question.
Okay.
You don't have a question? Okay. Well, let's wait, let's know what we're speaking to and get the motion on the floor, because she's got a numerous one. So you're going to start with this one?
Sure, I can do anything you want.
Okay.
Okay, that further to motion CB 23-14 passed on March 21st, 2023, that the CAO be directed to permit the operation of shared e-scooter companies such that the total number of e-scooters permitted in the city of St. Albert does not exceed 300.
All right, I accept that. I'll open up to questions. You have a question, Councillor Mackay? Okay.
I got a question to administration. Based on the presentation that you had at the committee of the whole back on the 14th, one of the big concerns are in relation to capping companies' numbers was the amount of potential work that would have to administration. Can you identify what you think that work would entail, and would you have to have a specific individual and potentially like what do you see the challenges of that being?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I'll ask Mike Erickson initially to make a comment.
Through the chair to Councillor Mackay, I think there's two possible scenarios. One involves a manual process that would require us to have identification numbers for the e-scooters, the actual physical devices, and would require some staff time to go out and validate or verify that the number that we put in place is correct, and that a cap of say 300 is deployed and is not exceeded. The other option would be to there is software available that we could purchase or procure that would allow us to see the number of devices deployed in real time throughout the community. It comes at a cost of around $7,000, $8,000 a year.
So last year when you were doing the project, did we physically go around and count the scooters? Did we identify that we had 300?
To Councillor Mackay, we did use the software, so we were able to do that from an office desk through a computer and log in and see how many scooters had been deployed.
But we're not purchasing that software this year, right? That was talked about at committee.
Currently, that was not our intention based on option one. Was the intent was to go let business run itself and not to purchase the software, but that is one of the options to oversee the 300 if we had to enforce that.
Okay, so I mean, but if this motion passes, then that would be, we would have to actually identify 300. So that leads me in. So I mean, would that still be a condition in the business licenses, or would it require an RFP licensing agreement process as identified in option 2, community focus?
Through the chair to Councillor Mackay, the typical process, what we've seen in many other jurisdictions, is the use of an RFP process to determine the allocation. Right, there has to be sort of an equity piece in there to help, give these businesses a sense of how many they're allocated. And if there's a new business that enters the market, then their proportional share would have to be adjusted accordingly.
So I just take it from that. I mean, potentially we could then cap it at like 3 companies or 5 companies and then just say this is how many you're allowed based on that number, which would require obviously some sort of an RFP process. Or if we left it open to a free market as it like option one company, a large company could come in and dump 300 down unless basically leave a smaller company alone, or is that how you would actually have to come up with some rules as to what each company would be allowed? So let's say we had 6 companies come in, that's only 50 scooters, right? So is that my math? Is that my math right?
Through the chair to Councillor Mackay, I think the best way to answer that would be to say that the first scenario that you put out is a possibility. An e-scooter company could come in and deploy several hundred e-scooters. Our belief is that it wouldn't be, they're financially motivated to deploy the most efficient fleet possible. They wouldn't want to have these e-scooters cost them thousands of dollars. They wouldn't want them to be sitting idle, unused for long periods of time. They would want to see maximum usage. So they would adjust their fleets to sort of meet market demand.
All right, thanks. I'm just trying to focus how I can see how this could work.
All good. Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. So when initially I had it where it was like 5 companies and then I was told that we don't want to go to RFPs. So let's just do 300. I'm not in this motion directing how to accomplish this goal. I'm leaving this really up to administration for how it will be done. My intention when I think it through is that it would be just equally divided. You'd say we have 300, you had 4 companies apply, you have 75 apiece, up to 75 apiece, and let us know how many you have. You mentioned the software. With one of the other amendments I have coming up later, with the condition that the city could ask for a report on the numbers and where they're going, and within 5 business days, couldn't we address and just get a report once or twice during that season to see what the numbers are for each company, to just verify that they are what we said that they would be permitted to allow?
I'll ask Mike Erickson to fly me, but yes, we could absolutely ask, but that presupposes that we get the honest answer, obviously. And, in terms of the actual ability to enforce it and say that we've got data to underpin it, that would require the physical oversight.
Yeah, okay. I'm just going to assume the companies are going to be honest with us. They're doing business with us. I don't think they'd want to wreck their reputation. Okay, I'm ready for debate whenever you are.
Yeah, I don't see any more questions, so I'll let you go.
Okay, so the reason for this was that last year we had a limitation of 300. And we had fewer complaints with all the parameters that you put in place. And one of the parameters was the limitation of the overall number. What I'm not saying is you're only allowed 60 or you're only allowed 70. We're going to if the free market has 2 companies come in, we can let them know they can go up to 150. We can let them know how many companies were in the past. They know what their competition is and they can decide if they want to come in or come or not. As far as the enforcement goes, like I said, if we have the motion later that says that the city can ask for their stats and information within 5 business days, we could get an update in May and July, for example, to see what the numbers are and just to verify that the companies are doing according to whatever we inform them their maximum number should be, the total of 300 on the table. It's not an intention for one company to come in and say, I'm doing 300, the rest of you are all out of luck. This is an intention of just the end goal. I'm not telling administration how to achieve that end goal. And so I'm assuming that administration, they're smart people, can figure out how to do this so it's equitable and that it can be easily monitored. And I think that simply asking for reporting would be a way to do it, a cost-efficient way, and achieve the goal of just not having it overrun potentially with scooters, which people were complaining about was causing excessive clutter. So we know that this can work because it did work last year. And that number is the same as last year. So I'm not suggesting we limit it more. I'm just suggesting that we continue what we had before, but actually with this giving a bit more leniency in case fewer companies happen to apply, that we could tell them that they could have a larger fleet if they so chose. That's it. Thank you.
Councillor Killick.
Yeah, I think personally I'm in favor of the free market, low regulation, low overhead. But I'm also very much in favor of protecting our neighborhoods and clutter from e-scooters. So we trying to find a balance. I think what Councillor Hughes has proposed is, we're going to trust these businesses to deploy them. We're going to trust them to repair them. We're going to trust them to pick them up after 2 hours. We're going to trust them to educate the riders before they ride them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think trusting them to give us a midpoint summary of how many they have deployed, or I don't know, every 2 months, something like that. I'll leave it up to the business team to determine. But I think we can trust them to tell us how many units they have on the road. And as long as in total it remains at 300, I think that would achieve both goals, free market, low regulation, and also protect our residents. I think 300 is also proven to be a realistic number based on the reporting last year. In fact, I was pleasantly surprised to see how many trips were taken, how many scooters were actually, the high utilization rate, the frequency and the use of trips, and et cetera, et cetera. So I think 300 is probably the right number. And so I support that motion that will achieve both of those goals of free market and 300. Thank you.
Councillor Broadhead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't mind this motion. We can say to the companies, this is what's allowed in the city of St. Albert, 300, come, do your business. If it exceeds 300, then we'll have a talk. I don't think we're going to get to close to 300 personally, but in any case, I'll support the motion.
Councillor Bermatsky.
I'll be supporting this motion as well. I guess everyone knows I voted against the free market in the first place. I was the only one, but I know we do need more regulation. In the Gazette, 44% of people weren't even in favor of the scooters, and then another 20-some% wanted it more regulated. So any extra regulations we can, add to keep it as constant as it was last year and not overloaded, or any regulations not being followed, I will support. That's it.
All right, I'm gonna have to weigh in. Councillor Hughes, I'm not supporting this, and I'll tell you why. First of all, I completely disagree with administration's understanding of this. This motion makes it framework number 2, 100%. But I'll accept the motion. That's fine. So my problem with this is we did a pilot. Absolutely. We randomly chose the number 300 for the number of scooters. That was a completely random number. If we really wanted to limit the number, we would have to talk to scooter companies and find out what they believed would work. And randomly choosing a number is not the way we should be doing business in an open market type framework. The pilot it worked. Absolutely. Everyone said it worked because it was highly regulated. We had RFP processes to get the companies in, and we had that computer software to track. So now, how do you achieve, Councillor Hughes said, well, I'm just giving you what the end goal is. You go and figure out how to achieve it. Well, the way to achieve it is to put Mike and his staff into excessive work. If we have company 1 come in on April 1st and say, I want to do scooters, and they're the only one, well, they get 300. And then on April 15th, if the next company comes in, they want to get a business license, then we've got to call company 1 back and say, now you can only have 150 because company 2 wants 150. It's Councillor Killick, you talked about the trust, and I trust the free market is what I'm thinking. So if on a Sunday we need 300 scooters in St. Albert, that's great. But if on the day of the Children's Festival, we need 500, the market dictates that. What I do believe is that we will never have more scooters than we need, maybe for a day. But then the companies are going to say, oh, those weren't used. We're going to take them over to Strathcona or somewhere. They will only be the number of scooters that we need. And that's the demand from our residents. And speaking of residents, we had a very good pilot, 2 years of it, I think, with lots of feedback. Our residents wanted this and we voted to go on a free market process. If it, you're right, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but I have trust in the companies, what our residents have said and what we voted on previously. And this to me, as I said earlier, as I disagreed with your decision on this one. So Councillor Hughes, I would rather let the free market drive this. And then honestly, if I'm wrong, I would absolutely come back and we could go to a regulatory framework again. But if you start limiting, we are now into regulatory framework. And I was at convention last week and talking to a couple, and for sure the city of Lacombe said they started doing this and their companies failed. So now we're looking at viability of businesses in our community. So won't be supporting this. And you have every opportunity to close.
Thank you. I had nothing to say and now you got me packed up here. Okay, so when this was discussed last year, the reason came to 300, I believe we were at 360 the year before. And there was a lot of complaint about the clutter. And so we reduced it down to 300. So this isn't entirely an arbitrary number. It was done with moderation without trying to overwhelm it. When the scooter companies came and they gave us feedback last year, they said they would require around 60 minimum, and they prefer 75 was what they wanted for viability. So if 4 companies come in, you've got the 75. If you've got 5, you've got 60, and they can make a decision if they want to continue. But those numbers were provided to us last year. The challenge we have is that when it wasn't a free market and we didn't have the regulatory process, we had more complaints. And I don't want to have to come back and revisit this. I want this just to simply be one and done and work. And it worked with the regulations that we had in the pilot much better than we had before. And so that's why I'm trying to keep it consistent to what we had. As far as the Children's Festival goes, children are not supposed to ride on these and we're not
That's an
supposed to
example,
tandem.
Councillor.
I understand, but that was your example and I'm going to combat it. Is that adults supposed to be out, not kids. So in the event that there was this particular situation, obviously they could have a discussion with economic development and there could be a situation where they say, we're allowing it for a particular function, but at the same time, an overrun of scooters all over our trails for any event could also cause a public safety issue. The residents, when I look at even the Gazette, as Councillor Bemansky said, 40% of them still don't want it at all. 20% want more regulations. So while residents are certainly accepting this in some level, there's many that still would like to see what we had or even more being put in to regulate this. And when I look at this entire, we're just keeping what we had before. And I'm also suggesting that when, again, administration can figure out a way to make this work. And what they can do is not company A comes in April 1st, they get 300, the rest are screwed. It would be that company A comes in and there'd be a deadline and we'll tell you how many you'd be available to have after a specific timeline, like 3 weeks later. If you want to pull your license, you can. Because we have 4 companies, it's going to be 75 apiece maximum. Are you in, are you out? That's a pretty simple way to solve the problem because they're going to be applying all within a very short period of time. But this isn't a first to the gate, take them all in type of approach. And I wouldn't expect administration to do that. It's been quite clear from everything that I've seen from all information from administration that they've been very open to trying to make the e-scooter program work and trying to figure out a way that it will actually be successful and work with the e-scooter companies above all. So I'm confident they can come up with a framework that would actually be able to meet this. There's tons of flexibility. All I'm saying is the max is 300. How they want to achieve this goal and make it fair for everybody would be up to them. And as I've said, there's so many ways to solve this. Bi-monthly or every once or whatever reporting on how many it is, waiting until you tell them how many you're going to have a maximum of until a certain number of time has passed, and allowing that to continue that way. So there's ways to make this work. This is what we did last year, and we had a more favorable response. And so I can't see how it would not still work again this year without having extra software, without trying to make this more cumbersome than it needs to be. So I'll leave it at that.
Call for the vote. Sorry, I missed it. passed with Mayor Herron, Mayor, or Councillor Jolly and Councillor Mackay. Who are these people today? I don't even know. All right, next one you want to put on the floor?
Yeah, but I may not. So let me just ask, because I got distracted. And so Marta, in the recommendation, it was to remove my two recommendations to A and B was to have them removed. And so what I'm trying to figure out was, why did you have it? Why was that removed? Because it had the condition to have it only be placed in public spaces was taken out of the potential limitations. And I'm not quite sure what was the thinking on that, or was it because it was redundant? Because if it is, I'll just pull the motion.
Thanks for the question, Councillor Hughes. I'll start, and if Mike wants to jump in, he can, but that wording specifically was taken out of the traffic bylaw, what was in place at the time. That has now expired and is no longer part of the traffic bylaw. So right now, those are not relevant conditions because they don't align with the traffic bylaw. That said, once the traffic bylaw comes before you in May, it very well may get put back in there. And then we as administration, if there is not a council motion directing us, we will then amend them. The business license inspector has the authority to just amend the business license conditions, and we would do so and be nimble that way. So it was removed to align with the current wording of the traffic bylaw. That's the answer to your question. So I don't believe that the motion is necessary from an administrative perspective, but if you wanted to move it, then the wording is there for you.
Okay. So with the, so it's not in the current traffic bylaw, and it's going to be put back in the current traffic bylaw.
Administration will make a recommendation of some sort. I'm not quite sure of the exact wording, but it will come before you in May for your consideration. And there will be an administrative recommendation to have something about e-scooters in the traffic bylaw. And then the business license conditions will get updated.
Okay. You know what? We can just pull that and wait to see what happens to the traffic bylaw and see if it's necessary. How about that? So the second one about removing again about being maybe operated on sidewalks and trails, but not in a reckless manner that yielding to pedestrian traffic. Is it for the same reason?
Exact same reason, yes.
So if these two didn't pass in the traffic bylaw, they could go anywhere though. Like this is kind of limitations.
So the traffic bylaw encourages users of the e-scooters to operate them in a certain manner, and the business license conditions tell the companies how they must operate their business.
Okay.
So it's just a different manner of enforcing the rules. If we put them in the business license conditions, then if the company doesn't comply, we can pull their business license or fine them in accordance with the business license bylaw. But if they're in the traffic bylaw, then we can fine the users of the e-scooters who are not in compliance with the bylaw.
Okay. Got it. You know what? Let's just pull those two then for now. We don't need to make things longer than you have to. So I'll put forward the third one,
So sorry, let me just keep up. with
which
you.
is C.
So we're pulling C.
Yeah, no, I'm pulling A and B because
Okay.
it's going to be handled next month and I don't want to make it longer than we
Okay.
need to. And I'll do C, which is to instate the condition that e-scooter companies must submit a report to the city containing fleet usage information within 5 days of request by the city and upon expiration of the business license each year. I made
All
it,
right.
yeah.
I'll accept that. Go ahead.
So the reason for this is the current condition is to simply have it upon the expiration of the business license. I'm adding, if we vote in favor of this, a condition that we have also that the city can ask for it within 5 days requested by the city. And this will actually facilitate the ability for us to monitor, for example, the 300 units if we ever had a question. And sorry, do you want to say something, Mr. Fletcher?
I don't want to interrupt, but we can do this without a motion.
You can just do
We'll
it?
just amend the business license to include the report.
Okay, I guess, are you going to do it without the motion?
Yes,
Okay, I can,
Sorry.
but I think the motion's been
do you-
accepted
do you
already.
Want to do it.
This makes eminent sense that upon request, we would get usage information. That's a broad caveat that is quite easily included that costs no staff effort really. That would be prudent, I think.
okay. So because it wasn't listed in the previous document, but your intention is to put it forward now that I've brought it up either way? I'm willing to withdraw the motion, Mayor Herron, just for sake of,
Okay. We've already accepted it. I can't remember how to withdraw. I always forget this.
I think I didn't hear anybody accept it. Did I
Yeah, I
miss
did.
that? You
Yeah.
did?
There it
Yes.
is. I mean, if you want to vote on it, it's going to be.
We can just,
included.
I can stop talking.
Sorry.
I'll stop talking. We can vote on it. You guys can do whatever you like.
Pardon? All right, call for the vote. Voting's closed and that passes with Counselor Jolly opposed.
So the next four motions that were emailed to us by Marta were not mine. They
That's right.
were,
So go to H, I guess.
so we can go to, actually, all of those were
Yeah,
not
that
mine.
was- Yeah.
So the only other one I had was about the fine. So do you want to just do mine and then we'll do Counselor Kellex, or do you want to skip back?
Sorry, what's the next one?
Would be the business license bylaw to amend to have a fine for non-compliance. And that's my last motion.
Go ahead.
Okay, the business license bylaw be amended to incorporate a new fine of $100 for e-scooter companies for their failure to remove an e-scooter that is parked improperly within 2 hours of notification.
So before I accept that, any questions? I felt like this was covered off in the backgrounder.
Mhm.
It was a $1,500 fine, wasn't there?
It's up to 1,500 if it's,
I'm just let me find it, sorry. So yeah, it was on page 41 of our agenda package. At the top, include potential fines for other consequences for non-compliance, such as from not picking up scooters, right? That's your thing. And then it says this provision can be applied to the e-scooter business that violate conditions of their license. Is this part of their business license that they have to pick it up?
Yes, it is.
So there's already a $1,500 fine
Yes.
and you want to make it $100.
can we just clarify for a minute, Mary?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out your.
Yeah, because when we had this discussion, Mike is off my screen now. I got a blue screen.
Mike, you still there?
When we had this discussion about what were the consequences, it appeared that there would be no consequences, but potentially we could do this overall fine, but likely it would not occur. And so my intention behind this is to have it where it would be an expected penalty each time and not you have to do something extremely egregious to have it be applied.
So, Mr. Fletcher, is this more of a question of, are we going to enforce what's already there?
I was gonna say fundamentally, this is an enforcement question. So $1,500 is significant. And I would not want to constrain the ability of the enforcement officers to tailor or make their decisions based on the nature of the infraction.
Yeah,
The issue, you know, if we're forced, it's 2 hours and that's $100, then our enforcement officers have no ability to apply judgment to a situation.
to the 15, because they might want to escalate it to 15 and I think Councillor Hughes is more looking for, we're going to enforce it, because whether it's in the business license or what is, or business bylaw.
It absolutely is. So a breach of the business license conditions can result in a $1,500 fine. Can I look at you and say that we're going to charge $1,500 every time someone's late? I think no. And I would submit that ought to be up to the
But it would be a-
discretion.
yeah.
But a repeat offender getting hammered with $1,500 is absolutely likely. Mike, do you want to jump in on that?
I mean, I'd just say that we did consult with internal departments, including our enforcement services, and there were some additional challenges that come with should someone challenge that ticket and you know proceed to court. I think there's some additional administration that comes if we're going to add a condition or a regulation like that.
So just so I'm trying to understand this, because 3 weeks ago when we had this discussion, we said, what would be the consequences if they didn't pick it up? And it was sort of like, there really wouldn't be consequences unless we were to impose this fine, which would actually, you'd have to really tick some people off to put a fine for $1,500 against a business license. So for just motivation, when I asked about what the motivation was, it was, well, they were on good behavior, we're on a pilot. We're going off of the pilot. So I'm trying to figure out something that would be motivational to make sure that the good behavior continues beyond the only extreme fine. So what I'm trying to figure out is if I have my motion that says if you don't pick it up, it's $100 each time. Does that actually, and I'm guessing I'm looking to you, Mara, does that override the ability to say if you violate your business licenses, there's a $1,500 fine because it's two different, one's a bylaw, one's the business license.
This is amending the bylaw, is that? that's
Yeah,
what
this
the
is not the
motion
business license.
Yeah, this is the bylaw, which is where the $1,500 fine is found as well.
No, it's in the business license. Right?
It's in the bylaw.
Business bylaw 43-2000.
Okay.
Section 2(1)B is right there. Yeah,
So
it's
if this
1,500.
motion passed, we would add another category of fine to the bylaw for a specific infraction only. The general fine that's in the bylaw right now is for a lot of things, including if you don't follow a business license condition. It would be difficult, more difficult, I think, to enforce the $100 fine for not picking up within 2 hours, because from a prosecution perspective, you have to prove that they had 2 hours, that it was there for 2 hours. Like, it's a very difficult thing to actually, like, you may be able to issue tickets, but they may get thrown out because that's not really an easy thing to prove. So from an administrative perspective, there is already a fine in there. It is a large fine. You can also, the business license inspector also has the ability to suspend a business license for not complying with business license conditions, revoke a business license, and impose a fine. So that's already in there.
I'm just thinking here for a second. Can you add context, Mayor,
Well,
Councillor? Dugan?
I'm just picking up on what Lee has said. So I mean, let's go, I mean, it is a little stretch, but when you look at abandoning your vehicle on a roadway, so under the Highway Traffic Act, you have 72 hours. We have to move that. So what they've done is administratively, you'll get MES or law enforcement will put a sticker on there from 72 hours after receiving the complaint. They will go back. If the vehicle is still there, then they will tag it and tow it. And then they can go to court with certainty that they can say that that's my sticker. I put my sticker on that vehicle, and that vehicle, when I went back 72 hours later or 2 weeks later, is still there. Therefore, I know it's 72 hours. The challenge you have when you go to court for time-specific offenses, is you could use a complainant who has opened themselves up to cross-examination to say, yes, I saw that scooter, that exact scooter. I went out and I took a picture of the number on the scooter, and it was there for more than 2 hours. And then you would have to rely specifically on that witness's evidence based on and whether or not it's accepted. So you've just raised quite a bit of procedural law, procedural admin kind of complexity into a process where I know what you're trying to do, but I would suggest that it would be simpler just to leave it as is rather than create a whole new fine structure with specific offenses and then can create confusion. We wouldn't create double jeopardy, but you would create confusion in a later state. It would be, I think it would be just better to leave it in the business. And this is just my opinion. That context would be better the other way.
Okay. So I can just say that if we actually had one central drop off and pickup point, like we do for every other rental, if for anything else in the city, we would not be facing any of these challenges. And recognize this is a recreational unit and not something used for commuting. So in light of the fact that even if I put it forward, it sounds like it would cause us more headaches than it would actually be worth, I'll take it out. But we have to also realize that the enforcement of any of these rules is almost not going to happen.
All right, Councillor Killick, I'm going to go to you because D, E, F, G, and H on Marta's email kind of referred to what you wanted to talk about today. So after some of the conversations where do you want to proceed to?
I'd like first to ask admin whether these points that I've raised could be incorporated into the business license without going through a formal motion and debate. They seem to be like simple.
Do you want to do them one by one?
We got to look at.
I totally agree. I mean, I think it was already said, Councillor Hughes asked the question about paved trails.
Yeah, I totally agree.
So we're taking that one out?
I would take that one out. A hard surface is fine, cement.
So that's the same thing. So F and G gone?
Yeah.
Okay.
However, the comments around which one is it? E?
D is the one you wanted to talk
D,
about the
sorry, yes.
automobile insurance policy.
D. We'll go to D first.
Okay,
Condition, e-scooter companies must maintain a $2 million automobile insurance policy. The reason I raise that is that that's standard language in a lot of our contracts. That we have general liability and automobile liability as two separate things. And that's just from my reading several of our licenses and even our bids when we go to tender. I wonder if this just got missed because when I see it is the 2 million automobile insurance is for the guys that drive around in the trucks to pick up the e-scooters, to either relocate them, maintain them, recharge them, et cetera. And the business license just didn't have it in there. So I think from I hope I specifically raised that one as not being too deep in the operational woods. It just wanted to really protect our.
I'm gonna look to our lawyer because this is getting into insurance that you might be able to help us through.
Yes, so this wasn't technically part of the administrative backgrounder because it wasn't brought forward today, but I can tell you, yes, it is common to have in our contracts a requirement for automobile insurance if we're entering into an agreement with a contractor. And we do sometimes remove it if there's no requirement for it. The business license conditions is the city telling the business how we expect you to run your business, but we're not entering into an agreement with them. We just care about the liability to our residents. So
yeah,
because we're not entering into a contract with them, we wouldn't impose an automobile insurance policy requirement on them. We have imposed a pretty high commercial liability insurance requirement in order to protect the residents from liability of an incident. So I don't believe it's required. I suspect if perhaps there might be an unintended consequence if we pass this, because I don't know if there's been time to canvass the e-scooter companies to see if that would impede their business or not. I'm not sure. So if this is something that's important, then because we haven't had time to put an administrative backgrounder on it together, it might be worthwhile to put in a notice of motion today to give you background information about it so we can know for sure whether there are going to be any
Or
unintended
maybe even
consequences or
an
not.
IR.
Or an IR.
That might be the better way to go.
And I think to the question, this is not something we would include in a business license unless told to do.
Okay. And
Otherwise, as it
if-
stands now.
If that's even satisfactory, that's not something we include in business license, we don't even need the IR. It's up to you,
I'll
but if you want to.
No, I don't want to belabor the point. This is one of those things where if in this discussion, we're saying we're good and our residents are protected, then I'll defer to the verbal comments here today and don't need to follow up with it. So
Okay, so the
that's,
next one is about helmets. So
that's gonna,
how should it just say in the business license conditions that helmets are consistent with the traffic bylaw, period? And not say anything about who wears what helmet?
Correct. That should be the approach taken, and we will do that regardless of whether this
Okay.
passes or not.
okay, so
Because
that,
that makes it easier because, yeah. And then their last one is
so the,
reporting of incidents, I think it is,
Right.
right?
so again, that was, the reason I raised this was a situation last year in Edmonton, where a young lady had an accident. Turned out, in hindsight, she was inebriated and drove into a wall. And the city only found out several days later when it was reported through the media. And then all kinds of things came.
I can tell you, Counselor Killick, from someone who's had an incident on a scooter, I didn't tell the company. They would have no way of knowing who, unless their scooter is damaged. But even then, they wouldn't know how it got damaged, who damaged it. Maybe they could tell who by who was renting it. But when I fell off, the scooter was fine. the first thing the person I was with says, let's stop your time on the scooter so you don't get charged. And then we just put it, you know, left it in out of the way and it was fine. So that would be a hard one for them to do. Because unless it's a serious damage to the scooter kind of incident, they would have no clue. That would be my thoughts.
And I would recommend if you want to go forward, again, because this came in sort of, we haven't done any analysis on it. I'd recommend an IR or
Conversation with the companies and see what they do.
Okay, I mean, again, based on verbal discussion, I'm happy with the answer and my intent of sending those in was just to prompt some discussion.
So you actually said, let's get some debate on this.
You know, so we're good. Thank you.
Okay, so next steps on this will be a conversation about helmets, which will come in a couple weeks, and then we'll see where that goes from there. But in the meantime, we're good to go with scooters. Is that good? All right. And that's the next step, yeah. Agenda item 11 is information request, notice of motions, announcements. So this is where I think you're going to read in your other helmet notice of motion, Councillor Killick. Okay, go ahead.
That traffic bylaw section 40 and 41 be amended to require inline skaters, roller skaters, skateboarders, non-motorized scooter riders and bicycle riders under the age of 18 to wear helmets, and that section 40-2 of the traffic bylaw be amended to indicate the use of sidewalk instead of highway.
Awesome. Is that the only one you had?
An IR.
Okay, go ahead.
So the IR is the IR's follow-up on info provided previously in IR 2304 temp parking at Grey Nun White Spruce Park. One, as noted in parking for Grey Nun White Spruce Park is available along Rankin Drive. Can an action be initiated with the developer to clean up the mud along Rankin Drive to make parking safe? And two, the city-owned portion of the Old Hogan Road, which is the main north side entrance into Grey Nun White Spruce, is currently a mud bog. Could wood chips or gravel be applied as soon as possible for a temporary solution for the next 2 to 3 years to make access more usable for residents prior to final construction?
All right. Thank you. Councillor Hughes?
So I had the notice of motion, but before I read it in, just in case we can save ourselves time, I'm going to ask administration. So specifically it was to amend the tax rate based on the electrical and natural gas franchise fees. And I know in the backgrounder, it had said that we might change them for the tax rate if we thought so. My question is your intention to change them? Or, and do you know by how much?
question I
Or
asked.
do I need to bring forward the motion at all? Because I'll save us time if we don't.
I'll ask Diane McMorty to chime in, but yes, it is our intention to change them.
And then does she even need to chime in?
Well, I'm curious by how much.
At the how much, I don't have
Okay.
those answer at my fingertips, your worship.
Is she online?
She was when we started.
I think instead of a notice of motion, budget adjustments come May 2nd. It'll be highlighted in the list of things we're adjusting. One of them will be the MSI operating being doubled. This, you know, the accurate number on assessment dollars for last year. So instead of a notice of motion, it might be better be dealt right when you do the budget adjustments.
It's just that I know that when they come forward in May, they have the final number and we don't want to be doing math on the fly. And that's why the recommendation from admin was to do it like a notice to waive the 21 days so we can do it in April so they don't have to make last minute adjustments. What I could do, because Diane's not here, is I could read it in. And then in the event that you guys come back and say, here's the number, and I'm like, totally cool. It works with me. I can just give you guys a notice that I'm withdrawing it. And I'd be happy to do that at the time of the debate. You guys don't have to worry about a backgrounder then. Does that make sense? Would that work for everybody? Because Diane's not here, I don't know the number. So I'm happy to read it in and then withdraw it if I just disagree with the number and you guys can debate with me at that time. And so it's that the 2023 tax rates adjusted to more accurately reflect the 2022 actual amounts collected to increase the estimate revenue for electrical franchise fees from 5,779,000 to 5,900,000. And that the natural gas franchise fees increased from 3,020,000 to 3,340,000, with the tax rates reduced by 441,000 to reflect the adjustment, and that the 21-day notice requirement is waived, so that we could debate it on April 18th if necessary. But again, if you're beating my number, especially, I won't be bringing it forward. I'll be happy to withdraw it.
All right, Councillor Jolly, you just sent in an IR. Do you want to read that in?
Sure. It just says, could we be provided with the ballpark cost per hour for council meetings in terms of staff time?
Okay, and did I miss any?
We're good, your worship.
Okay, all right. I just also, before we make a motion to go in camera, I want to remind everyone that Friday is Green Shirt Day. And we're all together on Thursday for training. So if you can, wear a green shirt and we'll get a council picture. Because I'm going to read a proclamation.
And Green Shirt Day is for
Organ donation.
organ donation.
Yeah.
As an
Logan Boulet. Yeah. from the Humboldt
Logan
crash.
Boulet
Yeah.
from the Humboldt bus crash.
Yeah.
Was put on life support and then became a organ donor and has driven a huge increase in organ donation. And it is absolutely Green Shirt Day. I wish we had lights on the building that we could just celebrate that.
That would have been awesome, actually, a green building. I need a motion to go in camera. Councillor Broadhead's up. Sorry, he verbally said it, so I'll let him do it. Oh, so Cheryl, is there a different section of FOIP to go in for this rec sharing agreement?
I believe that was the section that we received. There's two sections, 24.1A and 25.1C.
Okay, yeah, it's on the screen.
Yeah, it is.
Do you care for me to read that in, then, Madam Mayor?
No, you can just say so moved.
So moved.
Call for the vote. Voting's closed. That passes unanimously. There's a potential motion coming out of in camera, so sadly, you guys have to hang out for a bit. Are you gonna keep control of the Zoom then and everything, because you're still here? Okay, I don't have to do anything is what I'm asking? you have Counselor Bermansky's vote? Is she back? Counselor Bermansky,
I can't see her. I didn't hear anything at all to this point.
do you have it?
I can vote, but
Counselor Bermansky? Is there a problem? Are you muted? No. Where's Sean? Maybe this room's muted. Okay. Can you give me a thumbs up? Or a thumbs down? Oh, you got it? Okay, thanks. Okay, is that good? Voting's closed and that passes unanimously. All right, I need one last motion in this chambers for today to.
Mayor, can I withdraw that motion before we do that? That my motion that I put notice of motion for?
Oh, yeah, you, okay.
So that just the notice motion that I just provided 5 minutes ago, I'm going to withdraw it after discussions with administration. I understand that there's going to be amendments going forward and it's unnecessary. So let's save ourselves some work. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. A motion to go in camera for a CAO dialogue. Counselor Mackay, go ahead.
So moved.
Call for the vote.
Well, Wes got to say it.
Voting's closed and that passes unanimously.